Hello, good morning, dear students. How are you? Hope you're all fit and fine and safe in your home. Myself, Gulshan Sharif, welcomes you to Mahila Samaja online digital classes. And also, I want to wish you a very happy and prosperous new year. Subject English, topic The Never Ending Story. The Never Ending Story, fourth standard, is a beautiful story. Let's start here. The Never Ending Story. Once upon a time, there lived a king by name King Khalafa. He loved listening to stories. He had 50 scholars at his court whose duty was to search old records for stories. Another 50 storytellers were appointed to entertain the king with these stories. He spent his entire time from the time he woke up in the morning until he fell asleep listening to these stories. But whenever a story would end, the king would become sad. So, dear children, you know the meaning of the stories, isn't it? Even you love the stories that are already I taught you about that Panchatantra, folk tales, everything. So, here this never ending story is a beautiful story of the king Khalifa, who was very much interested in the stories. He don't want to give up his life without the stories. So what happened once? Let's see. Once upon a time, there was a king by name Khalifa. He loved so many stories and he loved to listen the stories. So he already in his court he appointed 50 scholars whose job is to tell stories from the dawn to dusk, that is from the morning to till evening or night. So the king spent most of his time listening to the stories, that is from time he woke up in the morning to time he slept, the entire day listening to the stories. But whenever a story would end, he would become sad. Just they want to continue the story. One day the king sent his men around the kingdom to proclaim that he would give the hand of his daughter Zaide in marriage to any man who could tell him a story that would never end. But there was one condition attached: all those who tried and failed were to have their heads cut off. So he gave an offer, open offer to the people of this country that he announced that he is going to give his daughters, that is her name is Zaide, in marriage to anyone who would tell him the never ending story. But there was one condition behind that, that was anyone who would try and fail to stop the story the he would cut his head out of the body. See, he's a king Khalifa and he had 50 scholars. He was listening to the stories. 50 scholars he appointed in his court to tell the stories, and another 50 scholars to entertain the king with these stories. Almost all he spent his time on this story from morning to night. See, but whenever a story would end, the king would become very sad. So one day in his kingdom, he proclaim means to announce or declare something publicly. He gave the public announcement that he would get married his daughter Zaide to the person who would tell the continuous story without giving a break. So behind that announcement, one condition was attached to that, that was who tried and failed will have their heads cut off. This was a condition put forth by the king in his kingdom. The best storytellers of the kingdom also shuddered on thinking about the punishment on failure, but the reward was too tempting to not give it a try. However, the fact there is no story without an end was undeniable. Soon suitors arrived at the palace. Some managed to tell a story for a week, and few continued for a month. But all the tales came to an end sooner or later, and so did the lives of the storytellers. Then one day a tall, dignified young man took up the challenge that others had failed at. He bowed to the king and began narrating. Once there lived a ruler who was as mighty as you. But he was greedy and tyrant. He desired to become richer, so he seized all the corn in the kingdom and put it into an enormous granary. So, children, here dignified means calm and serious and deserving respect. So, tyrant means someone who uses power in a cruel and unfair way, and granary means a building where grain is stored. So, next, what happened? One day, the young, tall, and handsome looking man came up to accept the challenge for which many had failed. He bowed to the ruler and he bore the condition put forth by the king, and he started telling the story. Once upon a time. Once upon a time there lived a ruler like you. So you can see the announcement here in the public. So people are hearing to the condition. They are very much interested. They want to try, but the punishment was very severe, thinking that they all kept quiet. But once a person came in, a dignified young man came into the kingdom to accept the challenge. So many suitors came to the place, but some of them managed to tell a story for a week, and some of them managed to try a story for a month. See, but all the tales came to an end sooner or later. You can see here, one day a dignified person came to the court to accept the challenge put forth by the king. He bowed the king and began narrating the story. That is, once there lived a ruler who was mighty as you, and he started telling the story. Let's have a look here. So he wanted to become a richer, so he seized and captured all the conditions put forth by the king in his kingdom and put it in an enlarged granary. So he started telling the story that the king, once upon a time there lived a king ruler like you, as majesty means ruler like you, but who was very greedy and cruel. He was very cruel and very greedy, and he wanted to become richer, so he seized and captured all the corn and he is in his kingdom and put it in a large granary. Granary andre a very big building where grain is stored. Corn andre ಒಂದು corn means ಕಾಳು ಬರುತ್ತಲ್ವಾ, ಜೋಳದ ಕಾಳು, that is called the corn here. So what happened next? At the end of the 2 years, when the granary was full to the very top, he ordered it to be sealed. But the bricklayers had accidentally left a very small hole open at the top. One day there came a flight of locusts, hundreds and thousands of them. The shadow of their wings darkened all the sky. They tried to get at the corn, but the hole was so tiny that only one locust could pass through at a time. So dear students, locust means a type of grasshopper that travels in very large groups and that can cause great destruction by eating the crops. So at the end of the 2 years, when the granary was full at the top, and he ordered to seal it, but the layer of the brick had left a very small hole. Hole ಅಂದರೆ ಒಂದೇ ಒಂದು ತೂತು ಇದ್ದಿರುತ್ತೆ. ಆ ತೂತು ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, ಸೊ ಆ ಲೋಕಸ್ಟ್ ಬಂದು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಒಂದು ಬಂದು ತಿನ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋಗ್ತಾ ಇರುತ್ತೆ. So one day there came a flight of locusts. Locust means a flight means a collective noun here, and as I told you, locust is an insect like a grasshopper. So hundreds and thousands of them came. Their shadow darkened the sky and they tried to attack on the corn, but the hole was so small that only one could get in at a time. So you can see here. So the king had captured the corn and it sealed into the big granary. So as I told you, granary is a building where grain is stored. See, after 2 years the granary was full to the very top and he ordered to seal it. So they sealed the whole granary, but only one hole was left over there. It was so small that only one locust can enter into the granary. So some So one locust went in and carried off one grain of corn. Then another locust went in and carried off another grain of corn. And another locust went in and carried off another grain of corn. And another locust went in and carried off another grain of corn. So one locust went in, carried off one small corn, then the next, then the next, then the next, and one after the other they carried the grain of corn. And so the story went on till the next 6 months. Okay, he continued the same thing keeps on telling for the 6 months, from morning to evening. Now it had been an argument that the king would not interfere. So before starting the story, he told the king that not to interfere in his story. So the king was listening to his story there, but he could not listen to the same thing again and again. Okay, it was very impossible for him to listen that one. So again and again he was full of impatience. He lost his patience and he spoke up. Yes, yes, I know. So now let us assume that the locusts have eaten all the grain of corn. So now let us continue with the story as the king. So see, the locust, all the locusts are flying in the sky and make the darkened. One enter the granary, coming out 1, 2. This process continue. That is quite impossible, Your Majesty, said the storyteller gravely. So gravely means in a very serious and important way. I cannot get to the latter part of the story until I have finished with the locust. So the king interrupted. The king sighed, so the young man went on, and another locust went in and carried off another grain of corn. And this went on for another 6 months, when the king again interrupted. So that's not possible, Your Majesty. So the king lost his patience and he asked, still how many days you are going to continue? So have a break, asked the king, but the storyteller said that's not possible to stop here. Still I want to continue the story without finishing with the locust. How can I continue the another story? He said. See, another locust went in and carried off the another grain. Same thing, the process was continuing. He asked, how soon do you think he locust will have emptied the granary? That is difficult to tell, Your Majesty, answered the storyteller. At present they have not cleared a space as great as a man's sight. Man might stand in, and the sky is still darkened with the shadow of the wings. So here what happened? He asked, how soon do you think that the locust would have emptied the entire granary? So as the king, he got the doubt and he asked the storyteller. So the storyteller told that it's very difficult to tell, my lord, because now they have only made space for a young tall man could stand, and the sky is still covered with the shadow of their wings, and it will continue, said the king. And the storyteller carried with his story. So very well, see, you can see here, and so the story went on for another 6 months. See, you can see here, impossible for Majesty to continue the story, but what to do here? But suddenly, with a wild cry, the king burst out, enough, enough, take my daughter, take half of my kingdom, and take my jewels. Please let me hear no more of those abominable locusts. So the fair Zaide and the storyteller were married with great pomp and ceremony, but no one was ever heard to say that he would like to hear the end of the story about the locust. For the storyteller insisted that he could not get any further with the story until the locust had finished with the corn, and the king was cured of his unreasonable love for the stories. So, but suddenly he loses his patience and he cried out, enough, enough, stop telling this, I am get rid of this story. One enter, another carried on, one enter, another carried on. Please take away my daughter, take half of my kingdom, take the jewels, please can't hear about these locusts, please give a break for this. The king cried away. So the Zaida and the storyteller were married the full celebration, but as far as the story is concerned, no one wanted to know the end, even when the storyteller wanted to continue, and the king was cured of his unreasonable love for the story. Even the storyteller was interested to tell and wanted to continue the story, but this king was not don't have the patience to listen that story. He will give a break and he realized that even all the stories have a end in the last. See, he lost his patience. Still there is a lot of place and the sky is darkened, informing the storyteller. Finally he told that, take away my jewels, take away half of my kingdom, get married to my daughter, please give a break for this story. He can't listen more to this locust. He got married to his daughter and lived happily. But no one was interested in this locust story. Though the storyteller wanted to continue the story, but nobody wanted to listen this story. Finally, they got married and settled, and the king got a realization of this fault. So, glossary: proclaimed to announce granary, a building where grain is stored; monotony, lack of variety; gravely, in a very serious and important way. Home assignment: what is the name of the king? How many scholars are there in his court? Who was Zaide? Name the insect that plays a role in the story. Dear students, I hope you understood the story, and please do the home assignment given in this video and try to submit in the WhatsApp group. Till meet you in the next class. Thank you.